I felt like I was the most hideous human being in the world. My boyfriend found the box of pictures and I thought that I wanted to kill myself. That's how broken I was inside.
Do you have any anger towards yourself?
Backing up, I felt very lost and alone and insecure my whole life, honestly. I never had a community or never felt like I had love, and not from other people and not from myself and not from friends. And I was just very disconnected from it for as long as I can remember. I wasn't like a hideous human being, but I felt like I was the most hideous human being in the world. My boyfriend found the box of pictures and I thought that I wanted to kill myself. That's how broken I was inside. And I was just like that's such a horrible feeling. I was so broken and so insecure that I could never love somebody or let them love me because I wouldn't even accept who I really was. And so that's when I ultimately realized, and that why I'm going so heavily into this work is because I don't want to just live my whole life disconnected from myself and just living into work or this or that or whatever to just distract myself from the pain I feel inside.
Today's guest is Hannah Hammond. Hannah and I had an absolutely incredible conversation detailing her upbringing and things that she faced that for the longest period of time maybe she hadn't addressed. Instead, she had incredible success in all of her work endeavors. But as you'll hear today, Hannah will discuss how she's now facing a lot of the adversity that was from her past and how it's leading to incredible insights and a journey that is worth going on. So I'm really excited for you all to listen in today. So without further ado, let's get it right into it. Hannah Hammond, welcome to Beyond the Cover.
Thank you.
I'm excited today to chat with you because you are an absolute, I guess you call it girl boss or however you want to call it, just boss in general. We've shared a few conversations and the people that, even introduced me to you, it was very apparent that you have a lot of respect with what you do and you're somewhat of an anomaly. Maybe you won't say that, but I would say that just based on the level of success you've had at such a young age. So you're in residential and commercial real estate, both, correct?
Yes, and private lending.
And private lending as well. I was clicking through your website. You were a self-made millionaire by 25?
Yes.
25 years old. Okay. And then I think something equally as impressive is you owned your first piece of property at 18?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Did your research?
I did my research. That's absolutely incredible. I owned my first piece of property. I thought I was impressive at, I think it was 23 or 24, but it was in Missouri. So I don't think people realize nowadays, at 18 years old, I think I couldn't even distinguish my right from my left at that point. So it's no shortage. To say that you've had success is an understatement in the real estate realm. And I'm assuming just in life in general, with the things that you've been able to accomplish. So I want to, though, go into the mindset behind it all, because it's one thing to go the entrepreneurial route. It's another thing to have a lot of success in that route. But a lot of people like to make assumptions that, oh, this person was given it. Mm-hmm. It's daddy's money, it's mommy's money. It's, that they, just knew the right people. And that's what we're going to dive into today, because I know that in your case, I think it was anything being given and all of it just being pursued. So, mm-hmm. But the first thing also I wanted to highlight was you have a podcast that's you just started.
About to launch.
Yep. Called Relentless. Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to start there. I want to know the reasoning behind choosing the title Relentless. I personally chose my title for a selfish reason. It resonated with me because I felt that for the longest period of my life, people would judge me based on appearance. And so I created this podcast to basically open up the book beyond the pages or beyond the cover and show people, hey, there's more to the individual than what meets the eye. because in a way I almost want people to do that with me. Was there a similar kind of thought process behind you creating the title podcast Relentless? Is that because you feel that you're pretty relentless and so you chose that because it resonated with you?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I remember a defining moment where, so backing up, I felt very lost and alone and insecure my whole life, honestly. Even today, I struggle immensely with self-worth and connection and things like that. So I never had a community or never felt like I had love, and not from other people and not from myself and not from friends. And I was just very disconnected from it for as long as I can remember. But I never would give up. Like I would just keep going and I would fail and I would keep going and I'd try again and I'd learn and I'd go and I'd grow. And although like I just refused to settle, and still today I refuse to settle for everything in life. Like I believe we can have it all. Not all at once, because there's a process and there's a price to everything you do and every decision you make and every goal you set. There's a price to that. Mm-hmm. But I refuse to settle for mediocrity in my health, in my wealth, in my relationships, in my spirituality. I just want to push myself to my greatest capacity of my human potential and help others do the same. And I read that book, Relentless, by Tim Grover.
Okay.
When I was 18 years old, I had just sold my first piece of real estate. Mm-hmm. I had a $36,000 check in my hand, and I didn't have any money growing up. Mm-hmm. And this was like, you're 18, get out. We're getting divorced. You know, parents kind of moved back in with their parents. And so I was like, off to the races, fend for yourself. Let's do this. But I'd been preparing for that for a long time and used to that, you know, take care of myself type of mentality. And I remember I resonated so much with that book. I was like, this is the first person that's ever understood me. And this is the first time I've ever understood myself. And so, yeah, that Relentless has just kind of been my theme.
Okay. Yeah. And it's awesome how I think people don't realize how one conversation or a book or just one thing, especially, it doesn't have to come from a loved one. It can come from a complete stranger. I've had many life-altering circumstances because of conversations with strangers, and so it's super awesome. It's like powerful that you receive that. It was like the book was the catalyst for everything that was to come. I do want to take it back just a little bit before that, as far as the origin story, or do you recall where that drive to evade mediocrity? Was there like an origin story to that, or a place that you can say, okay, this is when I decided that I can't do this? Or did it just kind of come on and one day you realize that like, wait, I have this drive to be more. I don't know where it's coming from, but I just feel called for more?
The earliest memory I have was when my dad wouldn't buy me ice cream from McDonald's. And I said I was going to be a millionaire so I could buy myself a McFlurry, all the McFlurries that I wanted. And I think I hated my situation so much that I wanted to become the exact opposite of it. Okay. And I think a lot of it comes down to my father and one of my brothers, who have probably, looking back now that I'm doing this work and stuff, have probably caused the most trauma on me and really shaped me to who I am today, which I'm ultimately extremely grateful for, because I don't know if I wouldn't be the same person that I am today. But my brother told me that I would never amount to anything and threatened to kill me when I was 10. And my mom called the cops and he was taken to jail. And that was a kind of a defining moment in my life. And I told him, I was like, I'm going to be a multimillionaire by the time I'm 30. And so that was it. Like, I was trying to like prove my worth, get out of my environment. I knew that nobody was coming to save me. I knew that there's no such thing as Prince Charming. And now I just started therapy, and my therapist, he he said that I had two choices. One was to become a sex object, so I would be taken care of and loved and provided for and protected, because I was very highly picked on by my brothers. Like, I didn't look like this as a kid. I wasn't hideous, but I wasn't like just like whatever you, as people probably told you that you looked like when you were a kid.
Yeah, people assume that I just came out of the womb at 6'5", 260.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like, no, I show them old pictures of me. And they're like, that's not you. I'm like, I know. It looks like I ate myself 3 times over.
Me too, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was really picked on. And I knew nobody was coming to save me. So my therapist told me, he's like, you either had to become a sex object or you had to become the man. And you did both.
First of all, it's interesting that, I mean, therapists, again, it's interesting that I guess he labeled it that way, but I guess I can see like how he's saying, yeah, there's choices ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
But you were able to place yourself in a position where you could, I guess, navigate in either territory.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel now, I mean, because nobody wants to be seen as like a sexual object.
No.
I'm actually curious. I've heard a lot of rumblings with real estate, and like you hear this when you get in the industry. Oh, so-and-so is doing well because of the way they look, and who knows what they're doing with their clients. Like, do you ever, or did you ever face those like stereotypes or that discrimination based on the way you looked?
Oh yeah.
Does it still happen?
Mm-hmm.
And if it does, I mean, how do you combat that?
Oh, all the time. I mean, you could go look at comments on my social media and they're like, we know what job you did to get to where you are, what jobs you did. Like, Botox and boob jobs will get you to the top. She got to the top by being on the bottom. Like, oh, must be nice having daddy's money. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my dad works at a pawn shop and makes minimum wage.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of those things for a while, since I started to become successful and take care of myself and do those types of things. But a lot of my looks and my desire to look good is because I'm deeply insecure inside, and so I'm trying to make myself love myself ultimately. And I'm still trying to figure that piece out. And it's been an ongoing battle. And it's so actually one of my mentors asked me just a couple months ago, like, oh, do you ever have sex for money? And I'm like, no.
Like, I mean,
No.
I'm assuming it was a shock that he asked the question. You're like, where's this coming from?
No,
is that what it was? Or
it's not even a shock anymore, because I'm just used to it. And that's what I'm a guy's girl. All my friends are guys. I hang out with the top 1% of people, like entrepreneurs in the space. More are guys than women. And like, I hear what they do and I see what they do. And I see kind of like behind the curtain of reality,
mm-hmm.
at least in the 1%. And yeah. There's a lot of stuff that happens. And so I've heard everything in the book. I've heard every single question, and people will always, like I post a picture with Robert Kiyosaki and they're like, oh, you're dating Robert to get him on your show, like accusing me or assuming that I'm basically having sex for money. And no, I have never and would never. And that's why I've worked so hard to create a life of freedom, because that's not a price that I'm willing to pay. Yeah. I may be insecure, but I have a lot more respect for myself than that.
When people say those things, do you think it's coming from oh, I'm just messing with you, I'm just joking, or do you feel that there's some malice in those statements ever?
Malice.
Malice. And how it sounds like you kind of just take it on the chin and just kind of like turn the other cheek. Why do you think that you do that? Is it just, do you feel it's just easier to just basically take the hit and move on? Or do you see it as like, oh, from a professional standpoint, I need to just be able to just roll with this and not, stay on my ground and say, and, because I guess there's that part of you that could say, excuse me, why would you even bring that up? I mean, how does it feel when, like, have you gotten to a place where it's numb when someone says it to you?
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to that. One is I've been numb my whole life. Like I've been told so many horrible things and have a lot of horrible experiences. And no matter what anybody tells me, like nobody has or will ever be able to hurt me more than this girl. And so it really doesn't faze me because I'm like, I hurt myself more than those words are trying to hurt me. And the second thing is, as I've grown and developed and matured, like I've realized that people who have trauma and people who are disconnected, all they can, like, they can't really see you. They can only project their own needs and desires and fears and insecurities onto you. And so I read that stuff, or I hear that stuff, or whatever, people hurt me. And I really try to, like, that's where the freedom lies, is between the stimulus and the response. Like there's that gap before you react. And that is how you know if you're truly free or not. And you see people who will just react right out of a trigger. They get triggered and they react. And that's not freedom. That's not connection with yourself. But if you can stop, pause, and understand, like, this person can only project their own fears onto me and their own insecurities onto me. And this isn't about me. This is about them. Like they're hurting. And that's not a me thing. And then it just really separates myself from the personal effect of it, because it just loses its meaning.
I find this so intriguing because I do the same thing where I use the circumstance, i.e. being on reality television and having, having been perceived a certain way as a monster by some people or a bad human being. And that really took me down to one of my lowest points in my life. But now I always go back to that. And every time I face a really hard environment or circumstance, I always say, you can't tear me down more than I was torn down in that moment. And so I use that to drive me to push myself through. But I use the experience of reality television and being the Bachelor and having a negative portrayal or outcome on that show. That's my thing. For you, that thing is you personally, but you're still using it in the same manner where you're like, nobody can take me to where I took myself. So these words roll right off, which that aspect I think is positive, to say these words mean nothing to me, because they shouldn't, because really, a stranger's opinion shouldn't really hold an impact on you, because you don't know where it's coming from. As you said, it can be coming from a place of projection anyways. So what's the motive behind their words? But I'm curious to know, because you mentioned that you've just started this work, this self-healing process. Do you have any anger towards yourself? Is that something that or do you blame yourself constantly? Or have you been able to already find grace and say, hey, I did the best with what I could? Where do you kind of stand when it comes to the way that you now feel about yourself?
Oh, I always have anger and blame for myself. Yeah, that's why I have been a very self-destructive person, and just seeking external validation and external addictions, and whether it's workaholicness or relationships all the time, or food, binge eating to try to feel fulfilled or full or cope, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, no, I'm actually writing a book right now. I haven't announced it. Actually, I think I posted a picture yesterday with Robert about it, but it's called Ugly Duckling. Okay. And I was talking to him about my story. That's how kind of the whole theme of the book was uncovering. I was just like, here's my story. And one of the things I said was, for as long as I've lived, every time I've ever looked in the mirror or even thought about my body just sitting here, I've just felt like an ugly duckling. And even as I've progressed up the social ladder or up the beauty ladder, or, some would say like I'm at my peak right now, like I'm 28 years old and I'm healthy and I'm society's standard of good looking or whatever. But I don't feel any better than I felt when I was pre everything, no veneers and no lip filler and no blonde extensions and no all the stuff, right? And I don't feel any different. And so that's when I ultimately realized, and that why I'm going so heavily into this work, is because I don't want to just live my whole life disconnected from myself and just living into work or this or that or whatever to just distract myself from the pain I feel inside.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be a whole person, and I want to be a connected person, and I want to actually be grateful and value and enjoy this life that I've been given, because life is truly a beautiful miracle, and I don't want to make it that hard.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm curious with, like, you mentioned the physical alterations and things that you've done. Have you also, like, I guess, have you made certain type of mental shifts to appease others? I mean, I guess the question I'm leading into is, as you currently sit here today, how much of you do you feel you can express authentically to the world? Do you feel that you're 100% yourself, or do you feel that there's potentially aspects of you that you want to be able to let out, but you're just not quite comfortable yet sharing that with others?
Oh, I'm pretty open.
Okay.
I don't think there's really anything about me that I haven't shared or wouldn't share.
Yeah.
I didn't used to be that way.
Okay.
I remember a time where I was so insecure. I remember I had a bucket of old photos in this house, and I was dating this guy. I bought the house for us. It was during COVID. This wasn't that long ago. It was almost 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I was so ashamed by what I looked like, and I'll post the pictures someday in my life or send them to you or whatever. I wasn't like a hideous human being, but I felt like I was the most hideous human being in the world. Like, literally, I was so ashamed of just me. And I broke, like, my boyfriend found the box of pictures, and I like thought that I wanted to kill myself. Like, that's how broken I was inside. And I was just like, fuck. Like, that's such a horrible feeling. Like, I was so broken and so insecure that I could never love somebody or let them love me, because I wouldn't even accept like who I really was.
And the pictures, just so I understand, were they like progress pictures? I mean, were you documenting just like the way that, what were the pictures?
Just pictures, like,
just of anything, like,
yeah.
of any, like, you were at an event.
High school prom, that was the picture.
But for you were holding on to them and really focusing on the way you looked in the photos, as opposed to like what the photos entailed, like an event. So that was a prom, but for you, were you holding on to them as like I don't know, maybe like an anchor point towards like, how is my body looking over the course of some time?
No, it was just the memory.
Okay.
It was just a bucket of photos, and I never let anybody, like, this is crazy that I'm on a podcast now and starting a podcast and now I speak and things. But when I was growing up, I would have a panic attack if someone tried to take a photo of me. Really? or record me.
Okay.
Like, I was so insecure.
Because you were concerned about how you would look on that video or picture.
Yeah. And then my brothers would make fun of me. They would like pull up a picture and they would make fun of me and like show it to their friends and stuff. So I was super traumatized by that. And I mean, I threw everything away. I threw my high school yearbooks away. I didn't keep any pictures. I think I have 2 pictures of me as a kid and 1 picture of me in high school before I did anything. And I just like to remember like who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is something that I don't know, we've not really discussed, but I struggled greatly with body dysmorphia, really up until probably a year ago. But for the longest time, not feeling good enough was the way that I always felt. And it stemmed from sports, and it stemmed from my lack of relationships with women. I was friend zoned by them all. So then it became this mission of like, well, how do I become better? And so anything that I could find that might not be good enough, I fixated on trying to fit, to basically make new. And one thing was my body, and so I fixated on my stomach region. And that was just something that I always thought I looked fat. And to your point, I don't, for those that don't know, it's like with body dysmorphia, I mean, people can tell you look incredible, but you just see yourself in the mirror as that you fixate on that part of your body that you're just like, it looks disgusting. And if someone looks at my, shirtless body, they're going to look right at that, my abdominal section and see that loose skin or that fat, that's on my oblique. And that's because that's what I saw. And it's, gosh, I mean, it's just something that you never stop thinking about. And when and if I was in the pool, I would be afraid to take my shirt off. It's like, and so you're always aware of it. I remember when I was sitting on the bus as I gained some weight for football because I had to. And then like when the bus, as we were going to the game, as it hit like a bump or something, I could feel my fat jiggle. And that would instantly pull me into like, you slob, like you look terrible. Like you're lucky you have your pads on. Nobody can see the way that you look with your shirt off. But it really just follows you and follows you and follows you. Do you feel that you've gotten a better grasp on that now? Or do you still feel that you're kind of in the same place, like with the body image issues as you first were?
Yeah. As I'm swollen wearing a compression suit because I cut my body open 2 weeks ago to get lipo. No.
Yeah.
It's not better.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better superficially because I do things to feel better. Like I can get the hair extensions and I could get the teeth and I could do this and I could do that. Like there's always something to make you feel better, but deep down you don't feel better.
Right.
I don't feel better.
Yeah.
Maybe I feel a little bit more confident to be on camera or to have photos or to do whatever, but I still won't wear a bikini.
Yeah.
No matter what, when I was anorexic, 95 pounds, I wouldn't wear a bikini because I thought I was obese. Today, hell not wearing a bikini. Definitely not, like 40, 30 pounds heavy or 25, whatever. Yeah, no, it's, and I don't want to live like that.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Well, and I really appreciate you sharing that because again, I think people, they have to understand, they look through their own lens and they look at a woman like you and people will tell you like, oh my gosh, like you're beautiful. Look at you. I wish I had your body. And they mean these things, but what they don't realize is that there's this, I'm pulling from my own experience because I don't want to ever impress this upon other people. I mean, I'm no mental health expert. I can only speak on my experience for what it is. And I would never, I'm like, hey, if you want to, get advice from somebody, go to somebody that's trained in that realm. But one thing that I noticed as I've been able to, I think I've seemingly overcome it was, I found self-love and self-confidence through doing the work with mental health and diving deep and understanding the root cause of why I didn't feel good enough. And when I was able to draw the parallels, I realized that all along I was the one that was inflicting a lot of these wounds on myself. It wasn't really other people to the degree that I thought. I thought people were constantly stabbing me when it was like me. That was the one that was always inflicting the damage. And so from my story, I realized it was perceived trauma. It was trauma that I was really kind of causing more so myself. And so when I realized like you're the one that ultimately doesn't feel good enough, well, you feel that way, but really like it's not people telling you weren't good enough. It's been you all along telling yourself you're not good enough. And so then I started to choose that self-love and self-confidence. And I guess I share this as, for a silver lining moment or the excitement of doing the work is that I started to choose self-love and self-confidence and I found it. And all of a sudden I was like, I stopped looking in the mirror. I stopped pinching my sides constantly, checking to see how, fat my stomach was or whatever. And it all just went away. And one day I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about it all today.
Yeah.
So that's what's incredible about doing the work. And it's awesome that you're like, hey, I want to dive deep into this because you found so much success and your business and all your ventures. And you might have already touched on this, but just to kind of reiterate, did you feel that a lot of times that you were just finding the next thing to distract you from having to look within? Like you were finding ways to be successful. And so you just found another venture to pick up. Like, do you ever feel that that's why you were picking up other things, was just to basically like, hey, as long as I'm busy, I don't have to sit within my own thoughts and digest this?
100%.
Okay.
Because that's the easy way out.
Mm-hmm.
It's the easy way. And that the book Relentless talks about that is when you achieve something, you get this dopamine hit and it doesn't last long. Yeah. And usually you're alone and you're in your car, you're doing whatever. And you're like, oh my God, I did it. It feels so good. I made it to this number, or I closed this deal, or I whatever. Right. And then it's pretty much immediately followed by severe anxiety and depression because you're like, now what?
I have to do it again.
Yeah. And
or bigger.
Yeah. And you're still, you don't feel fulfilled. That fulfillment fades so fast. It's just a hit.
Yeah.
And then you got to get another hit. And the easy thing is to just do what I freaking did and be like, okay, well, now I hit this goal. My next goal is I'm just going to be a billionaire. That'll set me for life.
Yeah.
And then someone asked me, why? Why do you want to be a billionaire? I'm like, I don't fucking know. And I made, I said something like, well, the more money I have, the more impact I can have. And he goes, that can be true, but that's not necessarily true. No. Because this isn't an impact from you being a billionaire. This is an impact that you can have that's free.
Right.
And that's not necessarily directly correlated. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Like that was just my ego filling an answer for me to continue to create on, goals to keep me living disconnected and not present.
Yeah.
And that I really, and then I did that mushroom journey, and I realized like when I don't have anything external, when I'm just with myself, it's just immense pain and self-loathing. And like, who am I without the business? Who am I without the G-Wagon and without all the things that I've built, and the hair and the nails and the clothes and all the things, right? And I'm like, do I really love who I am? Do I even know who I am? Do I even, I don't even know. I don't like, the answer is no and no.
Yeah.
And I'm not okay with that. And I'm not going to settle for that.
Yeah. I find it interesting how there's this stripping of, the ego. You mentioned that when in order to really, you pull away all of these things that you've accrued, that people look at you, oh, you have the G-Wagon, like you're so successful. And you can get all the validation you seek by like pulling these material possessions. Or for me, it was like my physical prowess, and it was my accolades that I achieved, going to the NFL, being the Bachelor. Like it was just basically like, how much, shiny objects can I pull in here? But when you choose to like strip all of that, I just find it interesting. It's like that verbiage is used oftentimes with a lot of people where they're like, you have to basically take a moment to say, hey, ego, we've accomplished all this, but let me pull this all away from you. What's left when we take away the superficiality or the material possessions? And you mentioned like going on like a psilocybin trip. I went on one myself, and it was fascinating because it was super insightful. But I basically stripped down naked in my apartment because I felt inclined to. And I think I said because I wanted to see myself as I was, not with anything covered up, and I sat down in front of this 6 foot tall mirror, and I'm like, I'm just here with me. It's just me as I am, nothing, covering me, nothing more than just me. And how do I view myself? Am I going to ever be enough? Right. I mean, I can look around at the apartment that I'm in, the luxury apartment. I can look at the house I bought. I can look at the nice clothes and the shoes and stuff. But like, if I strip all that away, am I enough with just what I see in the mirror? So this stripping effect is powerful. And I think that's why I highlight it, is because like, it seems to be something that that's helpful and seem to have worked for you to say like, hey, okay, let me pull this all away. What am I now that I pull this all away? I still have it. Yeah. But what am I beyond that? I want to dive into the work that you're doing right now. As you started this, how long would you say you've been really diving into this aspect of doing the work?
Probably since, it's been a lifelong journey of survival and trying to get better and trying to heal and trying to feel better. Ultimately, I just want freedom. And that's been a lifelong journey. However, and then, realizing I can't live with this anxiety anymore. And then I got an anxiety medication that was a handful of years ago. And that kind of allowed me to cut the edge and be able to start doing things to get my body in better shape, start to try to eat more healthily, build better relationships, because I wasn't isolating myself because I was so anxious. So that helped me to start kind of going down that path. Okay. But The real work, I just recently started, I would say 3 months ago.
Okay. And has it been harder or easier than you thought?
It's a lot more work than I anticipated.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, I wasn't entirely certain how you'd answer that, but I think it's also important to highlight that for me, it was the same thing. And for a lot of individuals that I talked to, and I'm like, hey, when you decided to go on the self-improvement journey, as you started learning the new terminologies and talking about manifestation and talking about doing shadow work and all these different terminologies, and learning about these different modalities and how to work upon yourself. I think there's this misconception that you think like, oh, I'm just going to all of a sudden start learning these things and I'm going to put them right to use and it's going to make everything easier. And what I found is, in fact, it's like opening Pandora's box, where you open it up and you're like, now you're cognizant of things that you never were. Mm-hmm. And so now it's like ignorance is bliss, but it's the opposite end of that. It's like, no, now you're opening it up and you're like, oh my gosh. And it becomes really overwhelming and it's really, really hard at first. I think people go into working upon themselves when they're in a low point of their life. And I think when they start to do the work, they actually go lower and I think that's important to note, because I think there's a misconception, and it sounds like maybe you thought similarly, that where you're like, oh, I thought it'd be easier. I thought I'd just open my eyes and go, oh, perfect. Here's the answer I was looking for. And it's like, no, typically you open up like the closet, there's more skeletons. You're like, oh my gosh, I have to go deeper than I already am. Like I was already at my low point. That's why I turned to mental health, so to doing the work. And now I'm going down farther. So it sounds like you kind of like felt similarly when you started. For
sure. Yeah. And there's that I recently in the past few months started working with a couple of different therapists, relationship coach, therapist, addiction therapist, different people. And a big inspiration for this has been me joining Genius Network.
Okay.
And which is like a really high level entrepreneurial mastermind, and Joe Polish runs it. And I'm so blessed to be able to call him a good friend now. And he speaks very openly about his previous addiction, and very traumatic upbringing. And anyway, he's very, connected with, he teaches a lot about addiction and connection. And Gabor Mate, who's one of the best, addiction and recovery coach.
Read one of his books. Yeah.
Yeah. The Myth of Normal. I'm reading it right now.
That's what I read. I listened to an audiobook.
Yeah.
Super powerful. Yeah.
But, it's funny because I went on this psilocybin journey or whatever, and I went in and she's like, what are your intentions? I'm like, I just want to know what my purpose for the world is, and like, and I went in there and I came out and I was like, that is not what I got out of this. Like, I have so much work to do. Mm-hmm. I need to like slow my roll, calm down, and actually figure out who I am and figure out like why there's so much pain inside. Mm-hmm. And I gotta figure that out, because I'm not there yet to be like, what's my greatest purpose? And let's go self-actualization. And yeah, it's a lot and it's super painful. And there's a quote that says, don't run from your pain, because the pain is trying to give you a gift. And in the pain is where you'll find your healing. Yeah. And that's the whole point, is like to heal, you have to reconnect, and you can't reconnect until you realize that you're hurt and that something's wrong. And then you have to seek help for someone who's fully attentive to you and your needs, and who's a professional to help you to do that. And so I think that's why it's called work. Yeah. It's not called play.
Yeah, as you were saying that last part, I mean, having to reconnect, I think of it like, it's like almost like somebody severs a rope. It's like, in order to tie the knot, you have to go back to the sever point, right? So you have to go back to where you did sever it. And then, but that requires you to be right back in that exact spot that you decided to cut it off and move beyond. And that's just not the way it is. It's like, if you want to go back to addressing why you cut something in the first place, then you have to go back to that place in order to understand it. But it's every bit work. And that's the thing that I think most people, I'm a part of a men's mental health group, and there's guys that have been doing the work for 15 years. And I found it interesting because my thought when I heard them say, oh, I've been doing this for 15 years, I looked at them and I left that meeting and I thought, they're still lost. Like 15 years and they're still lost. It actually, in a way, it played, my brain started saying, is there any point to like continue to do the work when you're lost 15 years later? Like I figured 15 years, you better figure it out. But I don't think we're ever really supposed to. We're supposed to gain a better understanding, but there's just so much that encapsulates, and the more mindful we get, the more aware we become of things, it's just another level. But somebody told me there that when I brought it up to him the next week, he said, it's like you're always on this path of growth where you're just navigating through the forest and going through up and down the mountains. And just because you've never reached your end point doesn't mean you didn't see beautiful views along the way. Mm-hmm. You still hit that mountain peak before you went back down in the valley. You still saw that really, really beautiful scenery when you went there. He's like, but that's what this whole journey is you're just basically maneuvering around, and there's still beauty in the process. And I think that helped like reshape my mind and say, okay, like there's beauty in it. Even if I never get to that end point, progress is still progress. So I'm excited. And I know like that with you, I mean, you're diving deep in it, and I'm looking forward to like hearing how that process goes for you. What's something that you've learned now that you would have told younger Hannah that you think could have helped her and during those hard times?
I think just to breathe and like know that it's going to be okay. And so many memories, I just think that the world is ending and I'm going to die, and not that I'm going to die, because I always wanted to die growing up. Like I truly did not want to wake up every day. And I was pissed every day that I did. But just that I was going to suffer like forever. And I just had that, I think I still have that fear, and I still have the scarcity mentality. Like I still feel like I'm poor. I still feel like it's the world's going to end tomorrow and I'm going to lose it all and I'm going to have to restart and rebuild. And I have this fear of going back into that really dark place. Like I'm paranoid of going back there because I have flashbacks of me, curled up in a ball on a couch alone, listening to horrible, sad music and just at my lowest of lows and just praying to God that I would die. And so just I don't want to live like that, and I don't want to mask it. I want to be like, life is such a beautiful thing. It's such a miracle. Like we're floating on a space rock in the middle of expanding nothingness. Yeah. Like that's insane. Like that we exist and we're made of these molecules, the same molecules that are in our body and the water we drink, and it's just absolutely insane, and it's so beautiful. And we get so lost in our heads about the shit that doesn't even matter. And we miss it all. We miss the whole point. And we make it so difficult on ourselves when it should be so beautiful. And yes, it's painful. And yes, like you have to have bad to know good, and you have to challenge and you have to grow, and we're problem solvers and we're creators and we're thinkers. Like that's not what I'm talking about. But to be able to stop and smell the roses and to live life in the gap to live life in the gain instead of the gap.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a book by Dan Sullivan. And that was one of those life-changing books. And he says so many of us live life in the gap, which means we're always measuring ourselves against an ideal of where we want to go. And the problem is if we're measuring ourselves against where we want to go, then we're not happy with where we are.
Correct. Yeah.
And we're stressed and we're anxious and we're not happy and we're not satisfied and we're disappointed and all those things because we've got to get here. And then we get there and then we're like, okay, now I'm here, and you're still unfulfilled or whatever. And then you set another gap and you measure against your next ideal.
Yeah.
And then, so his methodology is living in the gain is never measure against the ideal of where you want to go. Measure against where you came from.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. we're kind of like tiptoeing on the power of presence, whether you call it, but I was curious whether you call it gain or presence, but he's using gain as in like versus what what you were before. And I like that. I think that's incredible because we always look ahead. We always look at the future. We always look at the comparison culture. We're all victim to it. We look at the person that has, whatever we don't have currently. And it's like, okay, how long is it going to take me to acquire that? Like they already have it. They're the same age as me. How long is it going to take to get it? Right. And we lose sight of, well, what do I have now? But another way to really appreciate that is to say, what do I have now that I didn't have 2-3 years ago? Or whatever, you can go back 10 years, right? You can say, hey, I didn't have this. So we don't do that often because, I don't know, it's just the brain. Our brain's always wanting more. Our brain is always wanting, especially for people that don't feel like they're enough. We always are looking at what more lies beyond what we currently possess. Yeah. And there's so much power in the presence where if you just, I wish I remember the name of the book. This book basically stated that all problems are interpersonal ones. It's an interesting discussion. I don't know if I can yet really dispute it, but the idea behind the whole book was every problem you have is created because of somebody else. If loneliness is a perfect example. They said, if you only ever knew, if you're the only person on this entire planet, and that's how it was from conception. That's from the day that you woke up and were born, or reason just came down on this earth, like you would never feel lonely because you're comparing the fact that you felt more as one with a group of people at another point. And so it's like loneliness would cease to exist if there were no other people around. So it was an interesting idea of like all these problems that we have in life are created from other people. It's the awareness of other people, or wishing we had something that someone else had, or wishing we were treated a certain way or viewed a certain way. It's like, if you took all that away and you're the only person on the planet, how many of these problems would still continue to be problems? And I think it's interesting. I'm like, I think many of my problems as a people pleaser would probably have vanished.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting mindset. What are some ways that you are able to pull yourself into the presence? Or for somebody that's like, okay, I want to start, doing the work, what have you found is like the best place to start?
So from where I'm going in the process is, reconnecting to the pain. They do this thing called a trauma egg, and basically write down every bad experience you could ever remember from your whole life. Okay. And the first time I did that, I was like reading them off with a smile. I'm like, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And they're like, you're disconnected. Like you don't feel anything towards these, because that's what trauma is. You disconnect from your body, and it's too painful in the moment to feel that. And so your body's like, okay, I'm not going to feel that. I'm going to do this instead. Mm-hmm. I'm going to become a people pleaser. I'm going to become a fixer. I'm going to become an overachiever. I'm going to become a whatever, all these things. And so that's like the first thing, is reconnecting that. And then,
can I jump in real quick? So you said you wrote down all of the things, from your past, but then you said that you didn't really feel them. You kind of laughed at them. So how do you go about reconnecting like to that? I mean, they say, oh, like you're just laughing it off. You're not connecting to it. Do they tell you to like, I guess, how do you become more intense with the emotion? Like what, cause I'm curious. I don't know. Like they tell you to feel it more. I mean, how do they get you to reconnect?
Well, so he'll be like, okay, well, let's go back to that. So we go back to like number one, and then he puts you, I'm talking about my therapist, puts you in a place where he said, because the number one sign of trauma is lack of self-compassion. Like that's the first indicator when you meet anybody and they have a severe lack of self-compassion, there's trauma there, whether they know it or not. And he puts you back, and a lot of therapists I'm learning will do this. They say, now picture it, like, let me picture, like you picture me as your younger self, as little boy Clayton, as a 6-year-old or 5-year-old or 3-year-old or baby or 10-year-old, whatever, right? How would you feel if you saw that happen to, or not even little boy Clayton, to any little child that's not you? How would you feel that dismissive about the situation? Would you feel hate? Would you tell that kid that he was stupid? Would you tell that kid that he shouldn't have done that? He should have spoke up,
Yeah.
or that he wasn't worthy and that nobody loved him?
Yeah.
Like, is that what you would tell any child out there? Well, the answer is no.
Right.
And so that really pulls you out of you and pulls you into like, let's get real here on the situation. And would you have compassion for that child? And would you think that that child was worthy? And would you love that child? And that really helps.
That's awesome. That's incredible. I mean, the way that I'm interpreting is basically you're pulling yourself, the bias out, because I think if you try to place your belt, I was curious at how that was, you were going to formulate that, what you're saying. Cause I thought, well, why isn't he just going to put you back into your own shoes? But I guess in that place, maybe there's some resistance to you going, no, but I had to go through all that because now I am who I am today. It's like, okay, that's fine. You found the silver lining in that, but no, like we need, would you be okay? Okay, that's awesome how they do that. I've never actually experienced that when I went to therapy. I'm actually going to go to EMDR therapy here soon, which I'm really excited about, but I guess they take you back into the past, but I wonder if that's how they'll go about it, is like, we found a way to basically be able to compartmentalize and pull ourselves apart from that moment and say, okay, but I had to go through this. But it's like, okay, no, but like relive it, but in a way where like you're the observer of it happening to somebody else.
Right.
Now tell me how you feel about it. Oh, it's unacceptable. Okay, then it was unacceptable to you too, right? And then that's, I think, when you have that wall breakdown and go, well, yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And he talks a lot, Dr. Mate talks a lot about the primary trauma for people that opens the door for other traumas to take place. Trauma doesn't necessarily mean that you were beaten or that you were molested or that you were starved. Like that is obviously severe trauma, but that's not the primary trauma from what he teaches. And it makes perfect sense. And it makes sense why so many of us have this, because it's so common and it gets passed down generation to generation to generation.
Yeah.
But the primary trauma is the child not feeling like they are seen, heard, or protected by their parents. And that child, because they're an egocentric mind, they can't put themselves in their parents' shoes and be like, oh, well, mom's dealing with this and dad has this issue and they were abandoned by their parents and they're stressed out with work. Like the child can't think that way. The child thinks, my parents don't love me. I'm unworthy. Nobody's here to protect me. I'm not safe. I'm alone.
Yeah.
And that is how the child develops into an adult. And most people never heal from that. They don't even know that they have trauma because they don't even remember that that's how they felt.
Yeah.
But that's what developed. And then that's where the either narcissism or severe insecurity or a lot of these, like the anxiety, the depression, and these mental and bodily problems is because he said that a child not feeling seen, heard, or protected by their parents is as bad of a trauma as not having food or water. It's nearly as bad.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, perceived trauma is still trauma. And I think a lot of people will say, oh, but it didn't actually happen. You weren't I had this said to me, well, you weren't beaten. You weren't abused in any type of manner. But that's something where it's like, yeah, but I felt insufficient. I felt I wasn't good enough. I felt that somebody might discard me, kick me to the curb, and then I'm fending for myself, so from a survival aspect, I felt I had to become something so shiny that nobody would ever want to discard me, because that ultimately protects me from, again, we have these survival mechanisms built in, and you're talking about growing up as a child, it becomes hardwiring that people just also make the incorrect assumption that as I age, I'll just age out of that stuff. I'll just move on from it, because it's like, but it just manifests into something else. So, being not one of the best football players on the football field led to me not feeling good enough in other areas of my life, and then having to try, and it just followed me all the way through my adulthood, where it's like, wait, how come me not feeling good enough as a 7th grader is still following me? It's like, because you never rewired the circuitry.
Yeah. Reconnected.
You just let it stay the way it was and thought you could just basically move beyond it. It's like, no, you have to go back there and like break those bonds and connect them in a more sufficient manner. I have a question for as a male. How what do you see? So, I mean, with you said you've mentioned, like, as you've went into the dating world and all that, what is something that men that you feel maybe don't do the best job of, that like they could do a better job of? It's like advice that you would give uh, as somebody goes into a relationship. I don't know if you've had experiences multiple times with men where it's like, this is the thing that I'm seeing that men like need to focus on, because I think, again, part of this question is coming from a selfish place. Um, but I want, people to like, it's like, how can we be better? As I go into my next relationship, like, what do you feel is something that is often missed, from men in a relationship, that's like, if you just did this, like, it could be so, this relationship could be so much better, and I've valued or seen or heard.
Yeah.
I guess advice is what I'm asking for men that may be listening.
I love that question. And this is a difficult but very important topic that a lot of people don't talk about, really. And my whole book is ultimately about relationships and my experiences from relationships with men from the time I was born, from my dad abandoning me to my brothers hurting me, to then how I developed and how I perceived men and wanted to attract men, and paired with my independence. So like I've always loved men and always loved attention from men, and I've always had all male friends at every area of my life. I never had female friends around me, not close. Like I've always been closer with men. And I always related more as a male, not like sexually, but like mentally, like the independent, the masculine energy. So I always felt like I couldn't relate with women, but I could always relate with men. And I've always really wanted a amazing relationship. And I love being in a relationship. I've never been single. And maybe I'm just codependent, but I really love partnership and building something together. But I feel like I have been in the same relationship that has repeated for 10 years. Literally, like this different face, a little bit different personality, but pretty much the same person every single time. And what I've felt like has been kind of the breaking point for me is my highest virtue is truth, number one, and authenticity, which is part of truth, and freedom. And freedom, not meaning freedom to go sleep with whoever or freedom to be disrespectful. I mean like true freedom to be each other's authentic self and to expand. Like I want my partner to make me feel expansive and to stand for me and to lift me up and to provide and protect and like all the traditional kind of manly things. Because even though I built a life where I'm independent and I don't need a man, I want a man. And I think we as women have that. It's part of our nature. Like we want to be loved and provided and protected by a man, even if we're not like relying on their resource. Like I don't need to rely on a man's resources, but I still want the feeling of being loved and provided for and protected and wanted and all of those things. And like, I need to look up to my man. I can't disrespect them, because then that would just remind me of my parents' relationship, and that's horrible. And where it gets difficult is I found in my relationships that the very thing that they initially were attracted to me is the very thing that ultimately ruins us.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah. And it's been, like, I love your beauty. I love your independence. I love that you have your own thoughts and your own freedom and your own visions, and you're building a life for yourself, and you don't settle for mediocrity, and you push and you strive and all those things. But then as we get into the relationship, it starts to like clip one wing, clip these feathers, clip these feathers, clip these feathers. And then pretty soon I am a wingless bird in a cage tied to the wooden bar.
Yeah.
And it's like that. And it just blows my mind every single time. And it's so difficult because it sucks because if you try to, it's like if you love someone, set them free. If you try to trap, like if you try to prevent your woman from living, and if you're threatened and intimidated by her, and you're insecure and jealous and controlling and manipulative and narcissistic, and I hate to throw that word around, but I definitely date them, like textbook. It's just never gonna, like, that's what's gonna make them leave. Mm-hmm. It has the opposite effect. Mm-hmm. And the best relationships I've ever been in, or I guess the times of the relationships, was when I wasn't being controlled. And I've never been disloyal to a man. I've never cheated. I'm such a bad liar. Like, you would know immediately if I'm lying. Mm-hmm. And I expect that in return. And so I think that's the thing, is just like truly have a relationship where you truly have trust for each other. And I know it's so hard because we've all been broken so many times and betrayed so many times, but it's so important. And I always remind myself this is like, I don't want to get jaded, and I don't want to continue to bring the thing that I think is already going to happen into my life to continue to have that happen, mm-hmm. and rob my ability from ever having a healthy and loving and amazing relationship, because I know that's going to be rare. Yeah. I know that's going to be hard, but I don't want to lose the faith that I could find that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's cool because I mentioned to you that I'm reading a book on shadow work, but there was in the book, it was talking about how opposites attract. And the idea behind that is that shadow work is basically like the shadow of somebody. You could call it the part of someone that they suppress, that they want to let out, but they, for whatever reason, they can't show it externally. That's kind of like the premise of it. It's the things that we suppress. But the idea is that opposites attract, because maybe that opposite is what that person wishes, like that by them dating somebody, they're fulfilling that aspect of them that they are suppressing, or they maybe don't possess. And so it's like completing the puzzle. But then what happens is that individual eventually turns on them and resents the fact that every day they wake up and they have a reminder of the qualities that this person possesses that they don't. So at first they pull them in to complete the puzzle of like, I need, a more out. I'm an introvert, so I want an extroverted girlfriend because I want this person to basically be the one to carry me into these parties, and then I can have conversations, and I don't have to be extroverted if they are. But then eventually, like, they start to compare themselves to that person, where they're like, every time they're out to the party, they start to resent them because they're like, they're always life of the party and nobody pays attention to me. And it's like, mm-hmm. Well, you dated me in the first place because you liked me being extroverted. You liked the fact that I could pull you into these discussions, but now we're somehow competing, mm-hmm. And I think that's what men, as a man, I can speak on this. I've done this in my previous relationships, where like we have this, like, we have to basically be the breadwinner. We're hardwired to think like we got to be able to one to provide. And it's like, okay, but you got to be able to also understand that, like, it's about being a teammate and building and growing together and highlighting each other's strengths and then working on each other's weaknesses. You don't have to start clipping their strengths because you don't possess them. It's like you want to be able to potentially learn from them. But I think there's an ego component where men, like, they don't want to. There's a lot of men that would not be okay with the fact that you would say, like, I don't need your money. They're like, well, you're like, I don't need it, because you don't. You're like, I could support 100 of you men, with my finances. And I think that's like a hardwiring where, I grew up in an environment where it was like the man was the breadwinner, the mother stayed at home and raised the children, which is a full-time job. It's hard work. But there's this switching now in society where women are now starting to become breadwinners, and men will ridicule other men for this, where they're like, you're not a man, you're sitting at home taking care of the children. Like, that's like, you're cooking dinners. Like, that's, you've become a woman. Mm-hmm. Right. So like, it's because there's this shifting dynamic in society that there's still this old school toxic masculinity mindset of like, men have to be physically behemoths, bigger, stronger, faster, more intellectual. And it's like, because maybe at one point the men were out being hunters, but now it's like women are out being hunters. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a shock to a lot of men's systems until eventually it becomes normal, it becomes commonplace.
Yeah. And that's what the book is about, is we're at this fork in the road in our society where women are becoming stronger and men are becoming weaker. Like, men are becoming much more feminine and women are becoming much more masculine. Yeah. And I don't know if that's a result of so many people are abandoned by the fathers, and then the mothers in the court system raise the sons, and then now the sons are being raised by a female and they don't have their father. And so that's part of it, which is causing the women to be more like men and the men to be more like women. And there's probably so many dynamics to it all, but it's, I think the world really needs strong men, and women need strong men. And we put on this, like, I know I live in my masculine energy, but I'm also a woman. Like, I'm a very feminine woman. I'm compassionate and I'm loving, and I want to be loved and provided for and protected and those types of things. Just because I have my own company, and just because I have independence, and just because I always wanted to know that I'm in a relationship with someone because I want to be in a relationship with someone, and because they want to be with me, not because we're trapped. Like, I don't want to be with you because I can't live without you because I need you to pay my bills. Yeah. And I don't want you to be with me because I'm your trophy wife and I'm locked in a cage in this house and I can't leave, and you're out fucking your assistant. You know, personal stories. Like, I don't want that. Like, I want to be with you because I choose to be with you, because you make me feel like a better version of myself, and you make me expansive and help me grow and feel better and be better and do better. And I want to do the same for you. And if you have a toxic relationship, you can't. Like, it's so easy. Like, when I start to ask now, do I stay or do I go? It's a hard question, right? It's very difficult because you always love someone, but it comes down to, does the person you're with make you feel expansive, or do they make you feel contracted? And if they make you feel contracted, whether it's your partner, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's anybody, like, the answer is go.
Yeah. I agree 100%. I think it's a really hard question or realization to come to. But if you take it down to that place, it's like, how do you feel ultimately? And your intuition in that moment is going to tell you, do I feel that this person is making me better or worse? And it's, you know, especially when there's so much history tied behind the relationship, 3-4 years, maybe there's kids involved. It's not easy to come to that place, but the reality is that, you know, you want to find someone that has that unconditional love, where it's like, I'm with you under no other condition than I just love your vibration. I love your energy. I love what you are. And you make me excited to wake up every day and to grow together. And I think, like, that in its purest form, I mean, that's love. It's like, I'm just happy to have you around. Like, you just make me a better person. You give me a purpose to want to wake up every day. And so, you know, regardless of what they're doing, like, I just want to be there to watch you win. And that's for me, like, as a former athlete, it's like, I want a teammate, right? I want somebody to win the Super Bowl with in life, whatever that Super Bowl is, right? It's just like, it's one Super Bowl after the next. It's a new season. All right. And now they're okay, though, the win-loss records are wiped clean. It's a new season. All right. We got a Super Bowl of coming up of, you know, we're about to raise a child, and the Super Bowl of, like, okay, yeah, you know, sending them off to college. And it's like, there's all these levels, right? New seasons of life. And it's like, I just want that person where it's like, all right, like, let's just go season to season. Right. And then just try to win. Yeah. I don't know. That's the way that I view it as a sports mindset, but
it takes two. Yeah, it does. And there's challenges, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. But I think a lot of people, it's my way or the highway. And I think that's a big part of the healing, right? But that goes back to the thing. If someone it has this trauma that they haven't healed from, and they're not connected to themselves, they can't see you. Yeah. They can't see your needs, and they'll only be able to project their own needs onto you. And that's where that becomes a very difficult thing, because if they can't grow with you and they can't, you can't grow together, it's challenging. Yeah. But I want to ask you though, what's like been your experience? What's been your biggest challenge in your relationships?
Lack of self-love. And I think that's where I was, just as you finished that statement right there. I personally believe that you can't fully love somebody else until you love yourself fully. I think, now that doesn't mean that I don't know if everyone fully loves himself. It's always a work in progress, but I think maybe a better way of explaining is you can only give as much love to somebody else as you give to yourself. That's probably a better way that I would explain it. So for me, what's always caught me up in relationships is that I didn't have self-love. So if I can't love myself, how am I supposed to then pour into you? Right? Like, all I'm focusing on is, how can I get to a point? I thought by dating you that I would feel completed, but I still feel insufficient. So now, instead of me trying to focus on building the relationship, I'm focused on trying to build myself. You know, I thought the relationship was going to be the solution, but all it did was just show me that it's not that. So now I'm in this relationship where I'm like, okay, well now I'm incomplete, and I thought you'd complete me, but you don't. You just don't, because I'm searching for another puzzle piece, you know, that I need to put in place for myself. And so now I'm off searching, and instead of like really like pouring into and walking hand in hand, I'm like looking over in this, why maybe I need to go over here, you know, and figure out if this is like what's going to help complete me. And then hopefully you'll still be here when I come back. Right. But then you're in a relationship where somebody feels that they're not seen and heard. And like, you're so selfish. And I've gotten that time and time again. It's like, I was, and I'm like, I have to be, until I can finally get to this place that I think I'm closing in on, where it's like, okay, now because I have an abundance of love and confidence, I can now pour from that full cup. Whereas prior I was trying to pour from an empty cup. So it's like I had to fill myself up with self-love and confidence to now I can give it to somebody else. And so, you know, but that came through doing the work. And so it ultimately all comes back to doing the work.
Yeah, it does.
We're like looking within and saying, if in order for me to find happiness, I have to find it within first. And then when I have an overabundance, then I will start to see the happiness externally, because I'll start pulling that in, because people just love positive people, right? I mean, you go into work and it's like someone asks you, how's your day going? You're like, another day in paradise. What does that person want to do? Not ask you the next day. Because like every day I go in, the first thing I do, I ask Clayton how he's doing. And I remember this in medical sales, someone used to say this to me, and I start avoiding them, because I'm like, you know, naturally we don't want it. We're not attracted to negative energy. So, you know, I would start repelling myself away. So I think when you start to have that overabundance of just positive energy, like you'll just start pulling it all in, you know, hey, how's your day going? That's been fantastic, man. Yesterday, I learned this new hobby last night, and it's like, that person's like, oh, really? What? And now you have a full on conversation. And now if every day you're coming with something positive, like these people are now just getting pulled in. Like, I can't wait to hear what Clayton has to say. He's always positive. And then that wears off onto somebody else. And so, yeah, for me, it's like, it was always internal. It was always something that I had to work on myself. And now I'm gaining that, and it's really cool, because now I'm at the point where I was like, okay, now I think I'm ready to like let somebody in. I'm still a work in progress, but I at least have enough energy to like pour into them so that I can help them build as I build as well, as opposed to basically putting all my energy into just me. So
yeah, because that's like the relationship, and I do the same thing, is lack of self-worth. It's one of those external things you're grabbing onto to try to fill the hole inside.
Yep.
And as you said, you have to be full. I hate the quote or the line like, oh, they're my other half.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you have to be whole.
Yeah.
And we're taught that, like, oh, find your other half.
Yeah.
And so we're taught to find someone to make you whole.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's so backwards, and we need to be whole and then find someone that helps us be greater and better. But the energy thing, I just remember every single day walking into my house as a child, or being in my house, it was just dark energy. Mm-hmm. And now I'm so in tune. Like, you never remember what someone tells you. You remember how someone makes you feel. Yeah. And I'm so in tune with energy now. Like, if I am in a relationship and that there's a dark energy consistently, like 10% of the time is going to be dark. Like, life is hard, stress happens, fights happen, you let each other down, there's business, there's health, there's death, then loss, like all the things. But my energetic intelligence coach, he told me 90% of your life, like 90's an A, 90% of your life, you should feel good. Mm-hmm. And people are like, that's not realistic. And he's like, yeah, it is. Like, why is it not?
Yeah.
And I remember one of my exes, I told him that. He's like, that's not realistic. It's like the other way around. And I'm like, I'm not signing up for that. Like, I had that in my other household, and I'm not going to walk into a dark cloud every single day. Like, because when I'm alone, it's light, it's bright. Like, I feel good. I'm happy. I love my day to day. And I think it's important for people to know, like, you can have that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's possible if you believe it's possible, but if you don't believe it's possible, it never will be. So, it's really a choice. And ultimately, I've seen it play out. I know plenty of people that 90% of the time are happy. But to your point, there's also that 10% that's just inevitable. It's life. And so it's all about, understanding that there's no such thing as perfection or 100% happiness, but we can get pretty close, as long as you believe you can. So, this conversation was incredible. There's so much more that we could talk about, and I'm sure we'll have another conversation down the line, but, Thank you so much for coming in here today. If people want to continue to follow along with your journey, where can they best find you?
Yeah, Instagram's the best place.
Okay.
At Hannah B. Hammond. I'm sure you'll put a link or something. And I have a link tree in there that has all the other sites and socials.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
Thank you,
Hannah,
Clayton.
thank you so much.